Hello, I'm Eleanor Rattenbury and welcome to 100 Stories Deep. Today I'm reading How It Used to Be and How It Always Was by Nikesh Shukla. And this story comes from a collection called Cooked Up, food fiction from around the world. And I've chosen this story because I love food in fiction. I love stories that are about cooking food, eating food, how food can bring people together, how food celebrates our similarities and differences, and how writers can use food as a way of exploring characters' emotional states as well. So that's why I've chosen it. How It Used to Be and How It Always Was. She feels alone in that house. It's a flotation tank of memories. The others use it as a functional sleep and eat pod, while she's left trying to keep it ticking along as a fully formed family home, a relic of what it once was, what it has since ceased to be. The museum of how it used to be and how it always was is hard to maintain. Progress is trying to make a claim on this house. Now her brother has lived away from home with his girlfriend, learning the ropes, seeing how other households run, and he has brought these newfangled shortcuts, methods and products back with him. She feels the blood rise within her because the museum of how it used to be and how it always was is not open for refurbishment. He mostly just sleeps here. He doesn't eat except for the occasional drunken fridge raid when he gets in, usually in a taxi because he's too drunk and too late for public transport. She admires his modestly paid job's capacity for bar bills, bags of chips and minicabs. She admires his capacity for going to work every working day with a hangover on 4 hours of sleep. No wonder that girl split up with him, she reminds herself when she feels too much admiration. Why did he have to find a flat? Why did he then have to come back? This isn't the family home anymore. This is her tribute, nay, her shrine. That's why she took his bigger room. That's why she cleans and provides food for their dad and ensures his life is clockwork, business as usual. That's why she is sequestered in memories. They never grew to know who the other was. They were takers of space and remote controls. Their social lives were dynamic opposites. He was pub and laddishness. She was pirated movies and crisps. The only bind between them is bereavement. Their shared experiences are of fractiousness and loss, not harmony. She has worked hard this Sunday to mark the year they've had. In the kitchen, she cuts up vegetables onto newspaper. The television is on, cycling around repeats of comedy sitcoms she has ingrained in her retinas. She has a can of Coke Zero fizzing away next to her. The hand that feeds the family is the hand that rules the world. Much as she tries, she can't quite replicate her mum's dishes. The right blend of spices eludes her. The cooking times, the preparation work, the bowls she pre-decants the turmeric, the garam masala, the dana jeera and the chili powder into. Everything is muscle memory from her years as sous chef. Her brother ambles into the kitchen with a can of beer, looking for something to pour it into. Everything must be decanted. Drinking out of cans, eating out of crisp packets, that was for everyone else. The presentation bowls and novelty beer glasses have been collected over decades for a reason. He picks a pint glass she brought back for Dad from a trip to Tenerife. It has a gecko image wrapped around it. Tenerife was a big step for her. Not just her first holiday without her parents, but also her first time staying away from her own bed. She didn't enjoy it too much. She found it uncomfortable. The sounds that kept her awake were the ones she wasn't used to. Sharing a room with a girlfriend, the heaviness of another body in there, it was too much for her. So now she stays in the house and she goes to work. She buys an elaborate coffee that tastes less of coffee and more of syrup from the same vendor every morning, and she drinks it before she gets to her desk. She eats from the salad bar in the staff canteen, and she leaves at the same time so she can meet their dad at the station and drive him home. She is lost without routine. Her brother is irregularity and chaos. She is clockwork, and she is fine with that. She wrinkles her nose when people make fun of her fastidiousness in social situations, both with family and friends. She ignores it when her brother says she is undiagnosed obsessive-compulsive, because what's to be ashamed of? If she didn't feel he needed to be followed around, to be cleaned up after, she wouldn't do it. It's down to him. It's how he lives his life that forces her hand. She feels the grit of spices between her fingers as she drizzles oil into the bowl and massages the ground powders, a kaleidoscope of broken colours, into a paste that she stuffs into small aubergines and large green chilies. This will be added to the potatoes she's frying in the wok on the stove. Her brother hates aubergines. She isn't doing this to annoy him, quite the opposite. This is her invitation from his stomach, urging it to ingest more than beer and crisps. It's a rare evening when he's home. He stares at a near-mute television, flicking from unrequited channel to unrequited channel, while their father sits adjacent to him, staring out of the window at the garden his wife so lovingly curated with a gardener, listening to the iPod his 2 children bought him for his birthday the week after it happened. An expensive grand gesture to try and harness his attention. She could do with help, but she won't ask for it. Both those men, both raised Indian and lazy. They should know she's on her own in here and can't do all of it by herself. She is learning too, and she's been to work as well, and she'd quite like to sit around and do nothing. But there is their habit, and there is her centred self here in her operations deck, from which she can dictate the ebb and the flow of the house. Once the potatoes have absorbed the scent of the mustard seeds she pre-popped into the wok, she adds the stuffed aubergines and chilies, and some water to let the spices bubble up and around everything. While it works its majesty, she stares at the photo of her mum above the microwave. It was the only decent photo they could find of her as they recently remembered her, and how they felt she should be remembered. Her brother had grown obsessed with a series of black and white photos of her in the 60s, where as a teenager she'd been dressed up like a Bollywood star, like Mumtaz. She was looking off to the side, posing, and the photo captured the scene's innate 60s-ness. She'd drawn a beauty spot on her cheek with kohl. Her arms were hairy, and she had a far-off look, one untethered by her eventual role as mother and as wife. It's a strange thing to think these things defined her more than personality, and this was the only evidence of her life as herself. Dad had found a picture of her when she'd been post-pregnancy but not overweight, and this was the one he kept by the bed. Meanwhile, she had opted for the one that most looked like her before she went into the hospital, where she looked like her mum. It had been taken at her birthday. It's important to remember the right person, she thinks. Looking at that photo too closely can still make her lip quiver, mostly because the only time she really takes it in is by herself, and this reminds her only too well that she is alone. On all roads, she is alone. And here in this annex of the museum, of how it used to be and how it always was, she finds everything amplified. Once the oil has risen in the curry, rising like a film to the top, she knows that things are imminent. She takes some mats and hot plates out to the dining table next to where her brother and father sit. Her brother asks if she needs help. "Well, you could make the dinner," she replies. "I thought you'd already done that," he says. "Well then." She returns to the kitchen and switches the hob off. She reaches down and gets one of the hot casserole dishes her mum always used to decant the food into for serving up on the dining table. If there is one change to the museum of how it used to be and how it always was, it's that they eat at the table more than just on special occasions now. Usually these are the one night every fortnight her brother is home, but she is glad that at least one vague activity involves them all. She doesn't particularly like the casserole dish, but she's not prepared to replace it with something to her taste. Everything must remain as is. Everything must be to her mum's taste, because if the house looks like hers and smells like hers, they are channeling her spirit every night. She places the glass lid over the dish and watches the condensation buzz against the underside. She carries the casserole dish out of the kitchen. Something crosses her mind, a feeling, a sensation, some sort of pulse, some sort of synaptic lapse of control, and her hands shake furiously for the split second it takes her to drop the dish. She watches it fall to the ground, holding her shaking hands. She is silent. She knows this is it. She doesn't close her eyes. She knows. She just knows. This is it. It is all changing. It is all falling away. Her mum is disappearing. The dish cracks instantly into 3 pieces. It's fixable, but she doesn't see that. She sees the food splatter out of the container and onto her bare feet, the carpet she has just vacuumed, and the wallpaper. She stares at it. She hasn't yelped or made a dramatic shriek, and the dish made nothing other than a dampened thunk on impact. She stands there staring at the mess and feels so alone. Her brother and father must sense something is wrong, because they get up off their sofa vantage points and come to see what is happening. Her brother puts his can of beer down on the side, steps into the food, the potatoes and aubergines mashing between his toes, and gives his sister a hug. It's a simple gesture, but it's exactly what she needs. She bursts into tears. She starts sobbing and reaches around and cuddles him as hard as she can. Their dad fetches a sponge, a damp cloth and a dustpan and brush and starts cleaning up the food. Her brother rubs her back and tells her it's okay. She apologises profusely. She says sorry again and again for ruining dinner, for breaking mum's dish, for being all wrong, for trying too hard to fill the void, and her brother tells her it's fine. Nothing is her fault. Everything's messed up and they're all figuring it out still. She cries and she can't stop. It's uncontrollable, a vibrating of her top and bottom halves. And while her dad cleans up around her, and her brother holds her, something in her feels lighter. The museum of how it used to be, and how it always was, has lost one of its exhibits, and it's not the disaster she thought it was going to be. She can visualise the dish in her hands, but can't replicate the muscle that caused it to fall. But that's fine. It feels okay. The dish is gone, there's no use crying over it. The burden feels lighter today. She wanted toast anyway. So I know that in this time I have been doing a lot more cooking than usual. So maybe after hearing this story you might be feeling a little inspired maybe to get into the kitchen and maybe make a dish that you love, or a dish that reminds you of a loved one, or maybe just a really simple dish that you just feel like eating. So if you've enjoyed the story, maybe take some time in the kitchen as well to make something nice. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to watch and listen to more stories in the 100 Stories Deep series, then click on the link below to subscribe. And thank you again so much. Bye.